So, good afternoon. Today, Grimm's Ditch is taking us on the higher part of it, and this is Nuffield Church behind me, and I love this yew tree, or how all the English old churches had yew trees to either keep the cows out of the churchyard because they're toxic, or to provide yew staves for longbow archers. And that's certainly been my interest. But this is again a lovely church, and it's very, very friendly. You can go in, and inside there's a little coffee station against a donation, and even a few biscuits around. And it's just utterly charming. But it's just one of these really, really nice English churches. And over there is the little tea and coffee station. And I just love that. And it's kind of a thing of help yourself. And there's obviously a live congregation here. And on these, in memory of Edward Lever of Uelm, who departed this life on May 5th, 1728, aged 67 years. And not least, let's not forget his wife, who also departed there at 82. So, fine. Interesting. And so this church has obviously been around, and again we just love all of this joinery and craftsmanship and cabinet making, and how things in or on our historical sites obviously reflect the long history in this land. But even the Church of England got invaded by COVID hysteria, where it seemed to be prudent to give, to give stupid advice on how to safeguard yourself against this terrible and horrible and novel disease, notwithstanding the fact that over 200,000 years of history and quote unquote modern history of, call it 20,000 years, how well equipped do you think that we are to handle a disease, a respiratory disease like coronavirus? And what is even more perverse, with all of the marketing that went around COVID, it got this label as being a novel disease. And of course, if you just scratch the surface of that, it's far from novel. This is something that humanity is well equipped to deal with. And the hysteria that was whipped up around COVID is maybe what I want to talk about more than anything else here. My only purpose of this and of these Grimm's Ditch talks are to provide a perspective that hopefully can be useful. And I don't have a particular agenda to drive. I'm not funded by anybody. I'm not like one of 97% of scientists that agree with the people that fund them, or the bodies that fund them. I'm just a everyman speaking his truth, as it were, as I overlook the Oxfordshire Downs here. Again, by way of scene setting, before I go back onto the thread that I'm kind of trying to weave here, is we're up higher now. We're at a vantage point on this Grimm's Ditch, where the path, as it winds its way towards Henley, would go across hills here and take in villages like Nettle Bed and Bixby, and is it Bixby or Bix? I think it's Bix, B-I-X, that's right. And it's kind of, you've climbed up Grimm's Ditch to get here. If you were walking this in 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, and you'll probably come up here and it's a bit winded, and like all of these paths, Prada, wait, let me take you off the lead, there you go. She's off the lead now and she's happy. As all of these paths were the main artery of civilization back then, I guess it's not surprising that they take in chapels and places of worship. So the Nuffield chapel that we just looked at there, it would have been on this route, and maybe people would have come up this route from Wallingford and been winded and thirsty, and maybe there would have been a respite point there where they can just sit down and take in the view. And obviously around the church or the place of worship, or maybe the community came first, or maybe the community came second. Who knows how these things played out over historical times. I guess there are Nuffield historians that could advise me on that. But on the lower part of Grimm's Ditch there are also chapels. These are, there's two chapels close to the start of it that are still consecrated, I believe, but they're not in use. And there's another village down the road of North Stoke, and that's certainly got an old English church. But spirit and spirituality has always been part of the human experience. Of course, we are fundamentally, despite what the woke agenda would have you suggest, we are fundamentally believing creatures. And COVID, I believe, I feel, has been a brilliant example of how beliefs that have been installed in us have been entrenched and driven home harder. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, COVID seems to have been a narrative-driven pandemic. Some people are very disparaging and call it a plandemic, and I would kind of have to agree that as I've done my research, I'm struck by how this didn't happen by chance, but there are patents in place that were filed in 2019, 2018, 2017. There were exercises being run planning for exactly the thing that then transpired in real life. Loves to pick up big sticks that she proudly walks along the path carrying, with her head held high and her body a swagger. She's just lovely like that. So, God, this is going to be a very disjointed talk, like the whole COVID experience was indeed. So, when I say a pre-planned pandemic, it seems to me that this didn't happen by chance. This didn't happen without some design. 2 years in, the picture is much clearer than it was when we first started. And to share with you where I was in March having a birthday celebration in 2020, and I was with some friends in the village, and I could kind of read the writing on the wall, And I knew that Boris, I felt intuitively that Boris was going to go for some sort of lockdown. And I warned my friends and I said, this is probably the last time we see each other, because I'm sure that he's going to do some sort of lockdown here. And lo and behold, the next day he announced this thing. And my position then was kind of half-heartedly or cautiously or gingerly supporting the lockdown. It felt like, with all of the scaremongering that was coming out of Wuhan and Italy, do you remember all of that stuff? Those horrible hospital scenes that we then discovered not that long after, were actually fabricated, and how the data seemed to suggest that there was an awful lot of old people dying in northern Italy, in one of the most heavily polluted areas of industrial Italy. Any which way, so my position was that yeah, lockdown is probably a thing, and we locked down. So my family, my wife and I, we locked ourselves down with our kids, and I have to say that the first lockdown was absolutely fantastic. I don't know if you recall that in the UK, and your mileage may vary depending on where in the world you are, but in the UK we had weeks of glorious blue sky weather. It was warm, and the idea of being locked down was not something that was hard. We lived in a small country village, and with some guilt I would say to people, well, we're kind of enjoying this lockdown. And I think that was the experience for many people, and I'm deeply cognizant and respectful that it certainly wasn't true for everyone, and if your experience back then was not that, then I apologize. So it is what it is. But the remaining memory that I'll take with me 10, 20 years down the road is bicycling along on Oxfordshire country lanes with our 4 bikes in the family, in the middle of the road, because there was no traffic. There were no cars on the road. There were no planes in the sky. It was, everything had slowed down, and everything was, as I described it at the time, almost more human. It was more, it felt like a reverb or an echo back to a simpler time. And hold on, better check my dog. Prada! Mia! She's coming. Thundering through the undergrowth. There she is. Ah, good girl. Yeah, she's very, very happy. She loves this walk. And it was a few days, a few weeks to break the curve. We understood that we were supporting the NHS, and there was something that kind of made sense. I kind of bought the narrative, though I did note that Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, he did a U-turn on it, and he was interviewed on Good Morning Britain, and he bumbled through a little thing where, and it wasn't scripted, you could tell that it was really Boris coming through, and he said, well, yes, this pandemic, well, we could kind of take it on the chin, as it were, and let it sweep through the population and achieve herd immunity. And this was kind of where he was, and I thought, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And people were criticising him and saying, oh, he's too passive, he's not doing anything, he refuses, da da da. But I thought, yeah, there's something about that. And Chris Whitty had, in that period, been on television saying most people who get COVID will absolutely not suffer. They will have mild symptoms and it will not be fatal for them. And I thought, yeah, sounds a bit like flu. And so be that as it may. And then we went on, and we went on, and we went on, and we got through the first lockdown, and getting into summer after that March lockdown, and getting into, I think about April, maybe May, the masks made no sense to me. I thought, how can we protect against a respiratory disease where the size of the virus is the equivalent of smaller than a mosquito going through a chain link fence? And I thought, no, masks make no sense. This is different, and I'm not fucking doing it. And so I stopped wearing my mask in public. I stopped wearing my mask everywhere. And interestingly, it was hard. Interestingly, it was harder than I thought, because I remember going to shop in Waitrose, and this might have been around the first period of time of the great toilet paper scandal. I don't know, scandal is the wrong word. The great dearth, the great shortage of toilet paper, when the British people went mad and thought, well, at least I'm going to be able to wipe my arse with toilet paper, no matter what happens here. But I went into Waitrose, and I went in without a mask. And I can remember, as a grown man, how my heart beat, and how it almost caused a mini anxiety moment, because I decided to go against what the herd was doing. And that's when the penny dropped. The mask is not about health, the mask is about compliance. There are, to this day, no meaningful, appropriately weighted analysis done scientifically that show that the masks have any impact whatsoever. But early on I came across a Danish study that showed that they had no impact whatsoever. And as we go forward, I think that it's very, very clear that the masks have done damage to people. I think that the masks have done physical respiratory damage to people. My wife got dermatitis from wearing hers, and soon refused to do that. And I think masks have done psychological damage to people. And I think masks, more than anything else, have done psychological damage to children, both in child settings and in school settings, where a society goes from having a huge negative conversation about Muslim women wearing face masks to a conversation where you're an anti-vaxxer if you're not wearing a mask. It's kind of a remarkable U-turn there. But the masks are about compliance, and masks have historically always been used to subjugate populations, have been used to subjugate slaves, and I think that's exactly what the masks were about in the great COVID pandemic. Then I started to look into things like overall all-cause mortality, and I studied some very good people's contributions to that conversation, and people that subsequently got banned on Twitter. And it was kind of, again, remarkable how we're sitting here splitting hairs trying to find increased all-cause mortality, and it doesn't seem to be entering the building. My family is in Sweden, and I noticed that they weren't doing lockdowns, they weren't doing mandatory vaccinations, they weren't overreacting and panicking about this, but they kind of looked at the data, looked at what this was, and made a different decision. And I thought, this is interesting. So why is the UK going down this different path. Then we had the weekly Downing Street briefings, and Chris Whitty and Valence and Boris were holding court in front of the nation. And having been someone who's done a fair few presentations in my time, I thought, this is scripted, this is bullshit, this is driving both fear and compliance. And it was like, I mean, I gingerly present a metaphor. It was like this little path here, where on the one hand you have freedom and nature and this wonderful resource, and on the other hand you have a beautiful field, and they erected a chain link fence in front of it to scare us from going into it, and we all kind of went along with it. I had a friend, and I think we're still friends, although we're not speaking much anymore because we took a different view on this whole thing, and I was armed with an awful lot of research online. Had an evening with him where I said, this whole thing is bogus, Pete, because there's no data, there's no efficacy. They're forcing through a vaccination, which is the coronavirus might have not been novel, but the vaccination sure was, with spike protein mechanisms and a fervent denial of genetic modification that now 2 years later has been owned up to, that it actually, the RNA does affect the gene aspect of being a human being. So I said, and what was becoming clearer and clearer and clearer was that the coercion was extraordinary. And my friend Pete said, well, we have a different view on these vaccines, but for me, the only way that we get through this is vaccination, and the only way that I'm going to be able to travel this summer is if I take the shot. And so he did. And I don't judge anyone's decision. At least Pete was intelligent, and at least Pete had looked into some of it. He didn't agree with my view, but he made a decision. But of course, that then became a decision that also applied to his wife, who is a fair amount younger than him. It also applied to their 3 teenage boys, because they wanted to travel as well. So on the back of coercion, a family got vaccinated. And I think that was one of the most insidious things about the whole thing. Brother, not too far. Because they coerced us. It turned into, you can't travel unless you take it. You have to take it if you want to keep your job. You must take it if you want to visit public places, blah blah blah. The whole thing turned into, you will vax or else. And that's when I got really stubborn about it. Now, my family situation was different, because my wife is certainly not a conspiracy theorist in any way, shape or form, but she's a deeply intuitive person, and she knew from the very start, the same as I did but for different reasons, she knew that we did not want this vaccine for our family. And so we never had that battle, and I feel profound sympathy for people who had a partner that was not on the same page as them, and especially when it was a partner that you shared children with. Suddenly that turns into very big family changing dynamics. So the other thing that I noticed relatively early on was the complicity of media. It was very... I reverse engineered from my poo brain perspective that, okay, they've declared an emergency, they have invoked an emergency act, therefore Ofcom put out guidelines that mass media, MSM, had to comply and support the government line. And then the government started to become one of the biggest funders of advertising in mainstream media, so that millions and millions and millions of revenues went into mainstream media, and fundamentally MSM became the marketing arm for the government. Never before had I seen how they would do daily mortality numbers on anything, and suddenly every day we had the corona death numbers. And then I scratched into the analysis of those numbers, and I realized, hold on a minute, this is based on... What a beautiful fella. The numbers were based on the PCR test, largely, and the PCR test will give you any numbers, any data that you want, depending on how many cycles you do on that. And so I realized that I gleaned that the PCR test has been ramped up to be running at 30, even 45 cycles, which will basically pick up the traces of a gnat's fart in any sample that you submit it to. And I thought, oh, hold on a minute, they're basing this whole analysis and these mortalities on death of COVID within 20 days of a positive test. And I'm thinking, they're manipulating and skewing the data to increase the mortality rates of this, and then they're using those numbers to scare the wits out of the population. And I thought, and then my journey, it felt like it started to become quite dark. And the truth is that there was so much that made no sense. Emergency use authorization that has now lasted for coming on for 2 years for something that is patently not an emergency. I mean, like I said at the beginning, we're the human species that's been on this planet for 10, 20, 30, 100, 200,000 years, maybe even longer, and depending on where you draw the cutoff lines for humans. But we know well how to handle pandemics. What you do in a pandemic is what they did in Sweden, is you're a bit careful, you don't rub shoulders with strangers too much, you protect your elderly, and you get on with it. And most analysis that I respect, they're actually describing children to you as the great buffer. It's the wall that stops a pandemic, because they create a herd immunity by getting immune to it, and so you have a block there where the vaccine, not the vaccine, where the virus does not pass. You shall not pass, says a very strong little child, because their immune system is so powerful and strong. Yet over the 2 years we've seen another very dark side to this, which is to start to insist on vaccination of children, of babies. The latest authorization, approved by the FDA and recommended by the CDC in America, is to vaccinate 0 to 5-year-olds. Like, that is dark, because the adverse reactions might not be killing everyone, but they are real. The amount of adverse reactions that's coming through social media now of people suffering from not from cerebral palsy, from Bell's palsy, from myocarditis, from random strokes. But people are not connecting those dots. And media is not helping them connect the dots. And that's again where this is just incredibly dark. Now, so I started to go on marches, and I started to go on the freedom marches in London, and I was inspired because there were 100,000 people, there were 200,000 people, there were 50,000 people, there were thousands of people who saw what I saw. And this pandemic has been an intelligence test. It's been a sanity test. It's been a compliance test. And aren't those results interesting? Now, I then, after 9 months of lockdown in and out, I found this speakeasy, this group in a local village that met every Tuesday night to discuss this and other things. Again, like-minded people that I met and rubbed shoulders with. I found a stand in the park in my local town, which again I've frequented and supported. I found like-minded people online, and we are incredibly clear about what's going on now. Now, if you are a normal person just coming out of this, I have met loads of people who've taken one vaccine, even two, and then suddenly woke up and saw, hold on a minute, this is not making sense. And I think in some ways their journey is harder because, one, they have to deal with the uncertainty of the impact the vaccination will have on them, and two, they have to deal with the horrific realization that you were lied to and you bought the lie. And that's not easy. So all power to the people waking up. Now, I'm not a medical scientist. I'm not an immunologist, and I know people who are, who again refuse to see this. But just because they don't doesn't mean that they're right. Everyone agrees with the people who are funding them. Everyone agrees with what secures your mortgage payments. Everyone agrees with what gets you a holiday. And very few people have the ability to withstand that sort of pressure. And it is what it is. The other thing that has been remarkable in all of this was how the vaccine companies, Big Pharma, have funded all sides of the debacle. They inject money into your television news providers. They put money into newspapers. They fund regulatory bodies. They fund academic institutions. And we're living in a time when we are seeing the power of unbridled capitalism. The billionaires became, at the very least, 30% richer, and the poor people got 30% poorer. And in that mix, we have some of the biggest criminals on the planet, some of the most criminal institutions on the planet, funding the regulators, influencing politics, politicians and governments. And the narrative is driven day upon day upon day. It's like a hypnotic beat. It's like brainwashing on a scale that may have always been there, but it has really become blatant here. And maybe we're meant to see this. Maybe we are supposed to get angry with all of this because there's another agenda coming along that we would then support. I don't know. But I can see that this is not right. I can see that it'll be over my dead body that they vaccinate my children. And I use vaccinate under inverted commas. As far as we can see now, 2 years in, the jabs are insidious because not everyone is getting an adverse reaction, of course not. But I have a friend who got thrombosis and who got blood clots in his legs that went to his heart, and he was between life and death for a period of time, a few days, a few weeks. And his doctor said to him, yeah, most likely caused by the vaccine because it is a known side effect. And yet this highly intelligent man kind of smiles nervously and tells me to shut up when I tell him to not take any more poison, and at the same time carries on vaccinating his teenage boys who's a friend of our son. And the inability of connecting dots is remarkable, but it's insidious. My parents-in-law, not out of nothing, but suddenly a cancer has reappeared, and my father-in-law has got 3 to 6 months left to live. Obviously triple jabbed. His wife, my mother-in-law, is failing memory tests, and we don't know what that's about. People are talking about Alzheimer's. My wife said that maybe it's a blood clot, a stroke, mini stroke maybe, that has affected her memory. But again, it's too close to home, and again they refuse to connect the dots. And so on and so on. Every family that I know has a vaccine injury story that they almost deliberately refuse to label as a vaccine injury story. And if they do, it's kind of shrug, yeah, I guess we were the unlucky ones. There's going to be a lot of unlucky people as we go forward with this. The best analysis I saw from some very credible people who seem to know what they're talking about said that each jab and subsequent booster lowers and affects and damages your immune system. And you could, for simplicity, say that it knocks off 10%. Could be 15, could be 20, but let's notionally say it's 10%. Then you're 10% impaired. Then you're 20% impaired. Then 30, then 40. Population in Israel, 40% impaired. The highest population in Europe, in Portugal, highest vaccination population, have had 2 shots and 3, and suddenly you succumb to a immune system related illness, be that cancer, be that AIDS, be that HIV, or a blood circulatory issue around thrombosis, blood clot lines, or myocarditis, yeah. And again, I'm no medical professional. Don't take my my words here as medical advice by any stretch of the imagination. But your immune system is powerful. It's designed to deal with viruses. As a society, we know how to deal with this, and it was not what we did during the pandemic. And as we're now coming through to another side of this, we're coming through to another side where they're ignoring the data, they're ignoring the follow-up, they are seemingly desperate to push this vaccine into children. There's another 10, 20 million people, depending on which country you live in, that are called children that they now want to vaccinate. And if you care for your children, if you care for humanity, that has to be the line. That has to be our red line. They can't vaccinate babies. It's unconscionable. It is wicked. It is literally evil. And that is my view, and I stand by that. So in the context of this thing that is waking people up called COVID, it's not COVID, it's the pandemic, it's the response to it, it's the vaccination program, it's how our governments acted in cahoot, it's how in lockstep they started to spout the same mantras, and somehow there's a manipulation going on here, an agenda, and obviously it ties into the World Economic Forum, which I believe I'm going to talk about tomorrow, or the next video I do here. But the thing that's waking us up, I believe, is it's becoming blatant now how they are running an agenda that does not have your best interests at heart. They used COVID to wreck your futures. They used COVID and the lockdowns to wreck your children's future. They used any pretext they could come up with to destroy small business. They don't want you to have a livelihood. They don't want you to be independent. They don't want you to have cash. They want you to be in a currency, in a system where they pool, where they control the purse strings, where they can turn your spending on and off. They don't want you to have a car. They want you to have an electric car that they can turn off. They want you to eat. They want you to eat insects. They want to ban you from traveling. They want to lock you down. This has been about control more than anything else. And if you speak against it, you get banned. If you stand up and believe something else, if you try to exercise a freedom of speech, they have started to erode that very right. They've eroded your right to have protest. They've eroded your rights to speak up. They've eroded your rights to not comply. And can I say, Nuremberg Code, it is just violated over and over and over again. They are gang banging your civil rights and your liberties. They are rapists, they're paedophiles, they are worse. And that's just from living through this 2 years and wondering what the hell is going on. And I think it literally is hell going on. I think there are very dark agendas here. And I think that the horsemen are coming in one after the other, after the other, after the other, to see this agenda through. It's like we are at attack, and they didn't bother to tell us that we're at war. They didn't bother to declare a war. They won't even celebrate having won the war. They will just do what they do. The unwashed masses, the great unwashed, the useless eaters, why have a conversation with them? But what they don't understand is our power. What they don't understand is how connected we are. What they don't understand is how empathy, creativity, love is powerful. And I think they're just about to discover. Because this is from what I can see from history, these things, it might get worse before it gets worse, but then we win. Having said all of that, what do we do? Well, for me, this goes dark, this goes south very, very quickly if we don't stand now. Not so much necessarily for our own protection or for our health concerns or for our indignancy about how wrong all of this is. Obviously all of those are good reasons to stand, but more than anything, Professor Desmet said that the normies, the normal people who are under the spell, the normal people who are under the mass formation, they need to see dissent. They need to see people standing up. They need to see sensible people who are not gluing themselves to roads saying no. They need to see people who are like them saying there's more to this than meets the eye. And half the time all I do is plant seeds. I'm not full on militant, I'm not argumentative. I just say, yeah, there's another way to see that. And every now and then when the opportunity arises, I let rip a bit, and I talk about some of the things that are just incontrovertible. But it's important for the people that I work with, for the people in my family, for the people that where I go and do my shopping, that they see that there's people who are not afraid, that there are people who are standing up to the narrative, if you like, that there are people who have enough courage of their convictions to say no. Because if you look at it from a normal's perspective, who is fundamentally driven by compliance in this instance, the saying no is scary. So why would I do that? Why would you do that? Yes, this is the time to stand with all of your heart. I'm not saying that doctors are evil. I'm not saying that people working in pharma are evil, although you can probably find them there more than in many other industries. But I can say that they are arrogant and they're dumb. They believe that they have all the answers. Now, what I'm sad about and surprised is that we stood for the NHS and the NHS didn't stand for us. There's been a few legendary NHS whistleblowers. There's been nurses that come out and they have spoken up, and I give them credit. And there's been doctors, and there's been the Great Barrington Declaration. There are thousands of health professionals who have stood, and it's kind of, whoops, another feather. There are some journalists that have stood out, but very few. There are industries that have failed us, but individuals have been delightful. Individuals have been courageous. Industries have been cowards. And the problem is that it's all driven by fear. People don't stand because they fear for how they'll manage their finances. People don't speak up because they're fearful for how they might lose their job that they fought so hard to get. You have to remember that people have been building careers for decades, and it's a brave man who gives that up. It's a Dr. Yeadon, it's a Dr. Malone, and the names could go on and on. But ordinary people are not that brave. In a tribal context, as you know, maybe from reading between the lines, I believe that very few people stand up. Very few people have that courage. And I think social compliance is important for the human survival, but in any tribal structure, there's also 1 in 30 that is there to protect the tribe. The tribe has a risk, which is to get taken over by psychopaths for the leadership positions. And if that happens, it could work out well. But if it doesn't work out, it can turn into a nightmare. And the tribe's survival requires there to be a rebel rouser, requires there to be a non-conformist, requires there to be someone who is good at pattern recognition and who is courageous enough to trust his inner knowing, who is courageous enough to say, no, just because all you 29 people are saying this doesn't mean that you're right. In fact, I know I'm right. Everyone who's resisting this at the moment, you know you're right. You know that you're on the right side of history. And it's time not to walk onto the train carriages It's not time to acquiesce to the FEMA education camps. This is the time to stand, because we might not win the next battle, but normal people need to see us standing because it will inspire them. And don't be a sheep. Be a black sheep. They're all black sheep behind me there. In that sheep of black sheep, be a white sheep. And if the sheep had all been white, be a black sheep. Stand up and be counted. This is the time. This is the place. If all of your life has come to this moment, this is the most important battle of our time. This is the most important battle of your life. This is why you were born.